Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the soap moments. The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com. Now here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today our guest is Jill Rath, CEO and founder of the Jill Rath Group. She is an experienced CX strategist and published author. For over 25 years, she has been delivering world-class customer service and experiences. She is obsessed with helping service-focused businesses develop high levels of customer loyalty, increase repeat business, and reduce employee turnover by guiding them to deliver celebrity customer experience. Jill's work is led by her 7-ingredient customer experience transformation process, how Jill developed her customer service first philosophy growing up in the McDonald family. From age 7, while shadowing her father, she experienced firsthand the results of the Ray Kroc philosophy of quality, service, cleanliness, and value. Her passion, knowledge, and understanding have been shaped by global experience and working across different industries. She discovered firsthand that the common ingredient for success was outstanding customer experience. Jill now uses her diverse background to help businesses identify their own issues, fixing them through the power of customer connection, transforming transactions into interactions. Welcome, Jill. I think it's one of the most important conversations a business owner can have is about customer service, because without customers, we have nothing. Doesn't matter if you're an internet, brick and mortar, whatever business it is, without customer service, we're lost. So can you fill us in how you got there and what you do and how you do it? And
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Things.
It's great to be here talking to you, Art. Thank you for having me on. I agree 100%. And I think just broadly that businesses today, there are many of them, not all, but from every time I speak to someone and I tell them what I'm doing, they're like, oh my gosh, I have to tell you about this experience, or I have to tell you what happened when I went shopping here or when I ate there. And I think that businesses are not training their people. They're not hiring their people correctly. And oh gosh, we'll go through the details. There's so much. I am truly obsessed with customer experience because that's what I grew up with. And so it makes me insane to go and see how poorly people are trained and the experiences are not good, and that companies have not trained their people to appreciate that their customers have actually made a choice to come to you, spend their time and their money over a competitor. And so I think that companies need to build a culture around appreciating their customers' choice to come to them.
That makes perfect sense. How did you get there? I mean, how did that start for you? I know you started with your family in the McDonald's business. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. And I know that a lot of people are probably thinking, oh, McDonald's today, their experience may not be so good, which also makes my stomach turn, because that is what I grew up with. And at the time, so my parents opened McDonald's number 150 in 1959.
Wow.
And so it was early on, and Ray Kroc was very deeply, obviously, he was involved and was there at everything, every step. And at the time, there were actually only 12 regional markets. So even less actually when they started, but when my parents started in the business. So I know what good service is about. And I know how I was raised in it. And it truly now is like a part of my DNA. It's just through osmosis. And I saw my dad in the store and how he interacted with everybody, from the maintenance man to his staff on the various stations, working the fry station or the front or the management, or I would see him in his office and how he worked with and treated people in his office. So I saw firsthand what customer service, how you relate to people. I was trained in that even early on. So I'm the youngest of 3 girls, and being young and seeing my sisters out there working and I couldn't work, I was really bummed. So my sweet dad had me answering the phone. I was 7 years old and the jingle at the time was, "Good morning, McDonald's is your kind of place. May I help you, please?" And of course, I will never forget that, right? And he even called like a couple times a day to make sure that I earned my earnings, my keep for the day, that I earned my job. And, you think about it today, whoever answers that phone, there's actually a position for that. They call them customer first impression directors, right? So whether it's on the phone or whether you meet someone walking in to a brick and mortar place, whether it's a law office or a retail shop, it's your customer's first impression of your business. And it's really, really important that if you're answering the phone, that you smile while you're greeting them when you answer the phone, because they feel that smile through the phone. You smile, you look at them in the eyes when you see them. And so it's really just something that I grew up with. And then as I continued on throughout my life, I worked, of course, in the business throughout various stations growing up, any chance I could to earn some extra money. In fact, when I was older and a teenager, I went to work in the office instead of in the store because I could make more money in the office. But actually, it didn't last very long because I was bored and I missed that customer engagement. I loved working on the register so I could engage with people. So I took a pay cut, actually, and went back and worked in the store. So it's just really a part of who I am. And every career, every other work that I've done, I've always thought, what's the best interest of the customer? What can I do to make their experience good? How do I meet their needs? How do I solve their problem and do it from their perspective? And that's just the work ethic that I was raised in. That's
a great work ethic. I mean, to start at 7, I started selling Christmas cards back in the 50s. That in the back of comic books, they had an ad for you could buy Christmas cards in July and you could go and sell them. And that's what I did. And I earned money that way. And I really did well at it. But what happened with me is that it led me into another thing, because one day I knocked on a door and a guy looked at me and said, "Well, you're a spunky little guy." And he said, "How would you like to have a paper route?" And he gave me a 10 customer paper route. Within a year, I had turned it into 160 customers. And my brother and his best friend helped me deliver papers every day because I couldn't deliver that many physically myself. So I hired them, my older brother and his friend. But it was really great. But customer service I had an epiphany when we were talking. And it was, what do you think about all this automated answering stuff right now?
I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Especially when it's designed in such a way that you have to go through like 3 levels to possibly speak to someone. And what's even more frustrating, it just happened to me yesterday. I was calling and I went through 3 levels and still there was no option to press anything to speak to a human being. And yet on the website, it said, dial this number. If you have a problem or it's emergency and you need to speak with someone, call this number. So I called that number and there was no way I could speak to a human. I thought, okay, I must have messed up. I went back. No, sure enough, that's what it said on their website. And it's just so infuriating. I think we just really need, and that's the other big thing with what I'm doing, is I'm so passionate about it. I'm so obsessed that yes, we need to deliver as a business a great experience, but in doing so, Art, we are actually going back to connecting human to human, because customers are people first and they're customers second. And I think that's super important to remember. And we just need that human interaction.
Yeah, everything has gotten so automated now that it's taken that human connection away from things. And that is a big, you used the word frustrating, I think it was, or no, it's irritating, it's frustrating.
It's all that.
And it just really bugs you because you want to talk to somebody to explain, because you can't do it to recording. You can't explain what you need. And
right.
They try to guide you from one place to another and you never get there.
So. Right. It's this endless loop. And to me, looking at it from the professional side, what message are you as a business sending to your customer? When you send them around this endless downward spiral, what are you telling them? You're telling them basically, you don't care about their time. You don't really care about solving their problem or their need. And who wants to do a business with a company like that? They don't even care enough to at least at some point help you get to a person and make it easy to do so.
Well, I think that that's a really valid point because you don't want to do business with them, but in some instances you have to. I mean, particularly the medical end of it now, because you call a doctor's office and it's got an automated machine and it goes through all the stuff and it drives me nuts. But after your McDonald's experience, what was next for you?
So growing up, I always had a dream of being a fashion designer. And my mom talked me out of going the design route. I'd never really done art, but really growing up, I loved fashion. And so Woodley wasn't so much designer initially. The way I knew of entree into the fashion world was through merchandising and marketing. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. So it wasn't like we had high fashion in Columbus, Georgia. And so merchandising marketing was the avenue. And my mom said, oh, it's terrible because everyone's holidays are going to be your craziest, busiest work days. So long story short, I decided to kind of pan that, and one thing led to another. And ultimately I came back to deciding this is what I love. I'm going to follow my dream. And I went to University of Texas here in Austin for undergrad. And after that year, after my undergraduate degree, I moved to New York City and I went to Parsons School of Design for fashion design. Mm-hmm. So I did become a fashion designer and worked for many years for Bridge and designer in markets, as well as in Europe. I worked in Italy as well.
Oh, wow.
So I followed another dream there. So fashion design. And so people are like, well, what does that have to do with customer experience? Well, every time I had to design a collection or develop or source or buy yarns to make because I was a knitwear specialist. So I was a knitwear designer. So I was always having to think of our target market, who we were selling for, whichever collection I was working with, and what do they want? What kind of styles? Is it going to be low neck, depending upon the age of the client? Is it higher neck? Do we cover their arms? All these little details, pricing, yarn, construction, duty, wherever it was made, production. There's so many elements, but I always had to be thinking of the end goal, and that is the customer. And what is it that they are looking for? How am I solving the customer's need or problem in that case?
Mm-hmm. And that led you into forming your own company after that experience? Or
So no, I worked for many years. It's grueling. It's pretty much a 24/7 business. And sadly, my last job, I was working for the Manuel collection for Manuel Ungaro. Mm-hmm. And my dad was diagnosed with cancer and unfortunately passed away within 6 months. Mm. It was a very challenging time. It's already been 24 years. I can't believe it. But it led me to stop and to say, you know what, I am really burnt out and I need kind of a break to just absorb everything going on. And in that following year, it led me to another love of mine. I've always loved food. Well, I grew up in the food business, but I've always loved also to cook and to bake and very detail oriented. And so I decided to go to culinary school. So I went to Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. And I had studied some French in high school. And I thought, well, I looked into going here in the States, but I thought, why go and learn from someone who learned from the French when I can go directly and learn from the French myself and practice my French? So that's what I did. And it was an amazing, amazing experience.
That would be really an awesome experience.
It was. And during that time, I went to London. They had a branch in London and I went for my middle terms. The school there, unfortunately, was not good. So I decided to just wait and go back to Paris and finish up my course. But I had an incredible experience of doing a stage at Harrods of London in their pastry kitchen. My pastry chef knew the chef there. And so it was really interesting experience, both from the onboarding process, which I talk about in one of the steps of my process. But here I was being trained and onboarded just the same as all those people who were going to be out on the floor interfacing with their customers. And yet I was baking in the kitchen. So that was really amazing. It was really a dream come true because I'd been there once when I was younger and just like drooled all over the food halls. It's an incredible experience.
I'm starting to have lots of thoughts about you. You know what? One of the things that I really admire is that you're a doer. It's one of the things that I preach. A lot of people just think it, talk about it, but they never go and do it. And you're living proof that you can do it. And follow your dreams in a methodical kind of way. And it's not like chaos. You know what you're doing when you go do these things that you've done. But I really admire it because so many people don't do what their heart is yearning for them to do. And that's an awful, beautiful trait to have, Jill.
Thank you. I really have tried to live my life with having no regrets. We don't know what tomorrow's going to promise. We don't know what's going to happen, in the next life or whatever it is later in life. And I just felt like I wanted to do something. Like I wanted to learn languages. I've always loved languages. And I had a friend at the time. He's still a good friend, but he was multilingual. And I was really inspired by that. And I did have the fortune of doing my junior year in university overseas. So I did learn my first language there. And I realized from that experience that to really embrace and learn a language, to really understand the nuances, you need to immerse yourself in the environment. You need to understand and see the culture and hear how people use it and really try not to use your own language. So that's how I did it. And so I thought, okay, how else can I go? How can I make it so that I can go live in these other places for the languages that I want to speak? It just happened that my fashion design allowed me to move to Italy and work in Italy and learn the language. I studied a little bit before I went, but I really couldn't say anything. There's an expression in Italian, but I couldn't put two H's together, as they say, neacca. And so just throwing yourself in. And I was telling people, don't speak to me in English. And I put myself in Rome where people really didn't speak as much English. So I'd be forced to do that. And so I did that really with each of the languages that I learned after that, studying and also just being able to live there.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting because I think it was 5 years ago for my 65th birthday, we went to Italy and I was just enthralled by the culture. But I'll tell you, one of the experiences we had there when we were in Sicily, we were sitting in a little restaurant and we're looking out across the street and a bus stops and an elderly lady gets off the bus and sits down on the bench. Bus takes off, goes down the road. She gets up and she goes to walk across the street and there's another bus coming and she falls off of the curb in front of the bus. The bus driver slams on the brakes. But in that instant, I don't think I have ever seen so many people run out of homes, run out of restaurants. Everybody was running to her. She was very elderly and she fell off a pretty big curb, but all the people there picked her up. But I was so impressed with their concern for another human being because I've spent time in New York and I've spent time in Austin and LA and all of these places. Sometimes you see somebody go down on the ground and no one will stop and help them. Or in the subway in New York, somebody will go and everybody say, don't bother and let the people help them. And it really impressed me. And I just love the culture. And then I have a friend that's up in Florence and she's a TV host, news host. And her and I have been friends for about 7 years. So she's great. She keeps on wanting me to come over and see. Wow. I'm kind of getting off track. After that experience, what got you into what you're doing now? How did you come to that?
So kind of in the interim, I used my food background towards food styling and I moved back to New York and did food styling. And I met my husband kind of later in life and I wanted kids right away. So during the food styling time, and I was still freelancing in fashion and doing other things, I had a gentleman come up to me also and ask me if I wanted to join his real estate firm. So a year later or so, I decided, okay, I know that I can make a difference. I was in New York City. I'm a Southern girl. And everyone always said, there's something different about you. And it's like, because I just talk to people, I look them in the eyes and I connect and that's who I am. And I think that's a big trait for Southerners. And it really echoes what you just said about New York and your experience living in New York, sadly. So I became a real estate agent and I'm still licensed in New York and licensed in Texas as well. And that, again, the common thread for me in everything that I've done is about serving your customer. And so in real estate, you're only as good as your past referral, your past client, what you're doing. Same thing with the fashion. You're only as good as your last season. So when I moved to Austin, I got my license and I realized I have to start all over from scratch. So I thought, okay, well, while I'm doing that, let's take some time, build up. Well, there was a piece of me that felt like I was leaving so much on the table and that I would be impacting one person at a time and one person, but I didn't feel that I would be having as large of an impact as I wanted. And I wasn't utilizing the majority of my skills and my abilities. So I worked with a business coach and I really just brainstormed and I put together all of my experiences and my skills and my training, et cetera. And I realized what I want to do most is help people connect, help people come back again and really see people as people. And in a business format, it's also a way to help businesses profit. And it just was like a light bulb went on. It was an epiphany. I really did have this epiphany of, oh my gosh, this is my calling. This is my purpose. I've been told before, you're a real connector. And it just feels right. It feels natural. And so it all led to me then launching this business as a customer experience strategist because I'm able to utilize everything from starting at that age 7 as a customer first impression director, so to speak, answering the phone up until now. And it just made so much sense. So it's really what led me to create my customer experience transformation process to work with companies. Right now, I'm also working, particularly focusing on looking at the hospitality and the restaurant industry, but really there are many markets where, look, we're all customers every day, multiple times throughout the day. And as you said at the beginning of the podcast, no matter what we do and where we're going, we're buying things and we're having these experiences as customers. So I think if I can help businesses who are sluggish, who aren't growing, who are having frustrations with customer turnover, lack of repeat customers, the revenue's dropping, I can go in and give them a fresh perspective, fresh set of eyes on what's going on and a real perspective. So here's a stat that blows me away that I think just about says it all. I believe it was Forbes did a study and they said that 80% of executives, no, I'm sorry, it wasn't Forbes. It was Harvard Business School. But they said that 80% of executives feel that they are delivering an outstanding customer experience to their customers, while only 8% feel that that's what they are receiving. So that is an enormous, enormous customer delivery gap. So what the owner expects and their perception of what's happening in their business versus the customer's experience of what they're receiving in their business. And I just want to correct the record. I apologize. It was Forbes who did that. So that study. So I think it's really important for business owners to really to invest in their people, to invest in getting a true perspective of what's going on so that they can hear what their customers' perceptions and needs are so they can answer them. And that's how they're going to stay in business and grow.
My area of expertise is expectations, and I've written the book Expectation Therapy and all that. But customer expectations are because you have so many different types of people, it's so hard to hone in and focus. And then you get customers that had a bad day, they're irritated, their kids have driven them nuts and all that thing. My daughter's in retail and she cries on her dad's shoulder sometimes about people that unload on her in her retail.
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
Setting. So is it fair to say that you teach employees like my daughter how to deal with customers like that? Or, I mean, I know you set up systems, but do you help the client experience in a store with what you do? I know you're training the employees. So what you train them in has to convert into the customer experience. So I guess it's kind of a silly question I'm asking. But
No. I mean, certainly it affects it, but I really believe in starting at the top, because before someone like your daughter gets on the floor and is sadly often abused by people who've had a bad day, one thing is, yes, to train them that this is not about you. Everybody comes. In fact, I had this ebook, and the companion piece kind of talks about and asking questions. And one of the things that I mentioned in there is, in fact, how everybody comes with their own stuff, right? We're all onions. We have layers and layers of stuff. And maybe someone did have a bad day and they're taking it out. So it's really hard. But in some ways, employers are psychologists, and we have to train our employees also to just be able to kind of put this shield on them, this raincoat of this emotional raincoat, right? And just let that stuff run off, because it's not about them. But it does have to start at the top. It has to start with the leadership. And the first step is, in my process, is really about getting very clear on your core values and your mission statement. And how are you different from your competitor? What is it that you want the world to know about you and why you're here? What about how your employees play a piece of that? And so the steps go around into the next would be the employees. But certainly then, once the owner is super clear on that, they have to hire and train their management to be in alignment with that. Every decision made thereafter must reflect back and be in alignment with those values. Mm-hmm. And so the management must be the kind of people who are hired, who are invested in that same core value, and then be able to lead accordingly to the staff, regardless of how far. If it's a restaurant, even your dishwasher. If it's a retail store, maybe even someone who's doing your cleaning, whatever it is, if there's anyone there that is a part of your company that represents you. So I think it has to really start at the top. And yes, the training comes at that level if that's what the company needs. So one of the cool things that I do is every business is different, but the main structure and the roadmap is the same in terms of customer engagement. So I would look at what's going on, where their problem area is. Where do they need the most support? And then we would co-create a solution around what it is that they are having issues with. And then I would go in and work up a system, consulting, training, whatever it is that they would want. Or maybe it's one-on-one with the owner, or maybe it's one to management. So whatever the company would need. And we would then go in and be able to also assess what's happening, so that we eliminate that delivery gap of the 80% to 8%. That's another one of my steps. So one of my offerings.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And when there's clear direction, it stops the turnover in an organization, don't you think?
Oh my goodness, 100%. People have to know what's expected of them. I mean, it's human nature. If we don't know what we stand for, what our purpose is in something, we don't know what's expected of us, and we haven't bought into and agreed to that expectation, the owner is wrong. How can you expect someone to deliver what you want if you haven't made it clear for them? And I think people generally are good natured. They want to help. They want to be proud of their work. They want to deliver what you want. When we give them the opportunity by clearly defining what our expectations are, I think people will surprise you and most likely over deliver if you treat them with that respect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. And one of the things that I was thinking about when you were speaking about all this is that in expectation therapy, the three key elements of it are to identify, to clarify, and solidify what the written plan. Mm-hmm. And that actually came out of physics, a physics class that I took one time. And then I turned it into a behavioral formula for teaching people about expectations and how to handle them. But that is the key about expecting. Once you know how to expect and manage your expectations and know how to clearly state them, life becomes so much easier, and disappointment stops, because disappointment starts with unmet expectations. I mean, think about in marriages, in employment, anything. Everybody gets upset when they don't know what to expect. And one of the other things I teach is how do you expect the unexpected? But that's a whole different kind of thing. So that's about families, some tragedy happening, and how do you expect the unexpected? But I don't want to go there right now. I'll get off on a tangent. But it's one of the things I thought about too was it seems like the larger the entity that you're working with, the more difficult it is to get that message all the way through their system.
It's interesting that you say that. I don't know about difficulty, but I would say it comes down to how they are structured. So, for example, Harrods of London is an enormous organization. And yet, here I was in one distinct part, as I mentioned before, in the kitchen, and I was still going through the same process. So here they had their onboarding very clear. And in that onboarding, it was just so interesting because they gave me a little booklet that I still have of all the expectations, what their core values are, what they stand for, who they serve, how they serve, what they expected of you. There was a video of Mr. Al-Fayed, who owns Harrods. And there he was talking to us. And growing up in McDonald's and seeing that, I was so impressed. It was really incredible. And so I use some of those techniques. Those are some of the strategies, I should say, that I offer and suggest to as a part of my process, because it's very effective. And here's this huge organization, but it was their way to simplify and to make sure whoever came into their doors representing and interfacing at all with a customer or just was a part of their organization at any level would experience the same onboarding, would have the same expectations, and know what I had to do to perform to be able to represent that company. So here's this great, huge organization, and they did it in such a great way because it was thought through. They had a plan, they had a system, and they met it consistently. And I think consistency is also really big and very important in that. And interestingly, Art, recently I've been reconnecting with some of the people who worked for my dad by Facebook. It's been so enlightening. It's been so cool for me to hear, especially having lost my dad so long ago. When I read and hear these stories, it just really makes me smile and warms my heart, because I realized this really was my foundation. And to know that there was a system. And so someone said to me, "Oh yeah, your dad had all these videos for us and he gave us homework and we would come together and meet and talk about it." I had no idea. I was too young at that level when it was going on. I thought that was really cool. And it triggered the thought about my experience at Harrods and not knowing that my own dad was doing that.
Yeah, that's really amazing. That it transforms across so many generations and it is carried on through you. What's in the future for you? Let's rub that magic ball and figure out where Jill's going.
Exactly. Well, my goal, honestly, is to connect with people as much as possible, to be able to help businesses, restaurants transform transactions into interactions. Because in the restaurant industry, in any business, and interestingly, in real estate, they call it a transaction, which has always bothered me. Because a transaction, by definition, is an exchange of goods or services for money. It's just a very cold transaction. There's nothing else. There's no human element, no emotion, right? So I think we need to transform transactions into interactions. And that's my goal, is to go in and help businesses identify what is going on. Where are they losing money? Customers, employees. And how does that all circle back to serving your customers? And so I see it as a winning trifecta. So when we really meet the needs of our customers and we train and we do all these things correctly, the owner wins, the salespeople win, and the customers win. And on the bigger scale, which really lights me up, is that if companies are doing well, they're giving back to their communities as well. And so the idea that through giving great customer service, we can actually make a better world that we live in, help the communities we live in, and then globally at large. So I really want to be able to help companies thrive through delivering an outstanding customer experience, and not just service, because to me, customer service, which is the word that was used all the time in the early days with McDonald's and the earlier businesses. But to me, the service is the given. It is that transaction. Service to me is a transaction. What I think needs to happen, and have everyone up their game a little bit is transform it into a genuine interaction. And interactions will in turn create those connections, and connection equals profit. So I think to me, that's just really important because 86% of people are willing to pay more for superior customer experience.
Absolutely.
So it's a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question. These things pop into my head. I guess that's why the show's called Shower Epiphanies. But anyway, what is the difference between customer relations and customer service?
Oh, goodness. Look at the words. I think it's right there in the verbiage. Customer service, yes, you are serving people. And I do think you need to serve them, but serve them from the perspective of wanting to help them, not just make a sale. Customer relationships, right? It's about making that relationship with someone, having that rapport, treating them as a person because people are people first. And it is people first.
The only reason I asked was because when I go to different businesses and I see things, I'll see some companies say, we give excellent customer service. And then I hear other companies talk about customer relationships, and which leads me to one of my pet peeves, but we can discuss it here pretty quick, but it's in labels. I get real hung up in labels sometimes because in the research that I've done with labels is that people tend to live up to the label that they're put on kids. They're told that they're ugly or stupid, and they live that their entire life. When we were working in the prison system, I did a survey with trying to determine if prisoners had ever been told that they were going to end up in jail. So we asked the question, had you ever been told as a child that you were going to end up in jail? Both men and women, in men's prison and women's prison, do you know that almost 90% of all of them were told as a child that they were going to end up in prison?
Oh my gosh. Well, of course, they lived right up to the expectations. They were told this is what's going to do. And they're like, okay, we're going to do this.
So,
that's really scary.
Yeah, it is scary, because I have a friend. I love her dearly. I mean, she's a dear friend, but she calls her two sons jackasses. I mean, she said, my two jackasses. It's always my two jackasses. And they're older. They're 17 and 19. And I keep telling her, don't do that. They're going to, but anyway, I've tried to get her. But getting back to the labels, one of my big things is I have stopped. It irritates me to know when people in the internet world or the marketing world and internet marketing, they call their clients their tribe. Mm-hmm. I find that offensive because
it's very controversial. I know.
To me, the people that I work with are more my family than they are my tribe. A family is something that is just deeper and there's more love involved in it and it's more closeness and more. A tribe is something you control. You try to control a tribe. So it's just my thing. I'm just going to put it out there. You can respond how you want. I see your face going. So
no. I'm just thinking that's why I love language so much. And that's why I love languages and having learned them in the country, because you see how the nuances of words and how we bring our own experiences even to certain words. Certainly, yes, there are, of course, the definitions, but the words we choose to use say so much about who we are, and I think, and about our culture that we live in. And it's very fascinating. I find word choices, and I try to be articulate and express exactly what I want to say. Sometimes listening to every word that people say gets me into trouble because I hear the words they choose. And then I'll respond to that and like, well, that's not really what I meant, which is great. That's fine. But I only know what they say. Right. So, but again, even with the words that people express, we're all bringing, it's not that cut and dry because we as listeners bring our own experiences into it. Like your friend that you just talked about. Oh my goodness, I have 2 teenagers. I just can't imagine. But what we say to them, that will stick with them for life.
Mm-hmm.
It knows how they're going to interpret that about their own self-esteem and when they go forward in life. And every time they hear that expression, that word, it's going to trigger all kinds of stuff for them. So we bring our own stuff to every situation, all the lingo and everything else. So it's very interesting to me.
You know, what's really interesting to me is that semantics and words and all of that is so entwined in good customer service, good communication, because I've gone into stores and talked to somebody and went, I'm done. 10 words out of their mouth, I'm done. I just can't handle it. So it really does become important. And our schools aren't teaching it. They just don't teach that stuff. Our school systems need to get back to the basics and start teaching these kids basics. We all have our stories of going into the store and purchasing something and giving change to somebody and they can't figure out what to give you back because the computer.
Oh my gosh. I have so many stories. I write down different experiences that I have, and I have so many experiences around change back that, again, I think of my dad because that was the one thing that I learned early on when I worked on the register was counting back change. And there was this very specific, systematic way of doing so. Mm-hmm. And rounding up, rounding down, getting rid of small change. How do you give them an extra penny or two? Oh boy, you'd think you just spun their world because if you give them something in addition, literally I've had people like deer in headlights. They're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to give you. And they're like, and I said, well, I gave you 7 cents, so you can round it down to 50. I kind of talk them through it and they're like, oh, but I already put it in the register. This is what I have to give you back. Like, it's like, how about we just use our brains? Oh, don't get me started on that one. That makes me so crazy. But very interesting.
I went into a store not too long ago in one of our local malls up here and purchased something. And I gave the girl a 20 and she gave me $60 back. And I said to her, we have a little problem here. And she said, what? And I said, look at my hand. I said, I gave you a 20 and you gave me 60 back. And,
she's lucky you're honest.
Yeah. And she fought with me about it. I said, they're going to take it out of your pay. It's coming out of your register. I said, if you think that I gave you 100, because she kept on trying to tell me I gave her 100. And I knew I didn't have 100 in my wallet. I said, there should be a $100 bill inside your register. She had to wait till the next customer came and the register opened so she could look in there to see if she had 100.
Oh my goodness.
And I made it right. I could not do that to her. It's before Christmas and everything. And,
very, yeah.
She is. Not everybody would do that.
No way. Oh my gosh. And the fact that she fought you on it, it's really amazing. I'm glad, Art, thank you for raising a very important point. And it is something, again, that I think of and talk about and deal with my training, which is every person who comes to work interfacing with a customer is bringing their own experience or lack of experience, whether their parents trained them or didn't train them. There's so much variation there. And so it is the job of employers. They may not want to be mama and daddy, and they may not want to be the psychologist, but if you have people there representing you, you have to train them to respond in the way that your culture represents, that you want them as your company. And so I think that's something that has to be leveled out, that you don't just put people out and say, okay, they're going to bring to the picture whatever they know from their experiences. That's what you're going to get with your customers. Wow. To me, that is very dangerous and scary. So I bring up the point of let's equalize this, regardless of someone who had a lot of experience and someone who doesn't, who came from maybe a home that didn't get much training, one who did. Let's find that equal playing field by telling them, again, setting the expectations, giving them the proper training, making sure they're on board with that before they're actually engaging with the customer. And I think, sadly, so many people are just thrown out on there and they're left to their own devices to respond in the way that maybe they were talked to. Maybe they were talked to badly at home. Well, they're going to turn around and do the same thing to your customers unless you teach them otherwise.
One of the things that I have a friend, I should say more of an acquaintance, that's a doctor, and we have had conversations about patient expectations and how he can level his office to meet the expectations of his patients. But one of his problems that he explained to me is when people come to the doctor, they come in and say, fix me. And doctors can perform some miracles, but they cannot perform miracles all the time. And things don't go right, and people are different, and their bodies are different, and all those things. So I've been working with him on it. I think I'm going to have him give you a call.
Oh, I'd be happy to speak with him. Absolutely.
I think what you've done and have created works in any industry that deals with customers, whether it's a patient, whether it's a retail customer, whether it's a wholesale customer, doesn't matter. Whether it's food service, whatever it is, I see a need for it. Well, we're getting near the end of our time. How can people get a hold of you, and where can they get a hold of you? And can you fill us in on all that?
Yes, of course. Thank you. So I would really welcome speaking to anyone. If any of what we've talked about and what I've said resonates with you, please do reach out to me. You can find me on my website is my name. It's www.jillraff.com. And Raff is RAFF, like French fry. And so that's jillraff.com. And you can reach me there. You can find out more about what I do, how to work with me, how to have a conversation. There's a contact form there, or you can call me directly at 917-887-5899. I look forward to speaking to anyone who's interested.
And they will also be in the show notes on the show. So if anybody wants to look it up in the show notes. Jill, can't say enough thank yous to you. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope that the audience will really reach out to you, because if there's anything that we need right now in our whole system, it's communication and compassion with how we deal with each other. And what you do just is another feather in the cap of creating good relationships. And I thank you for being on my show. I appreciate it. And we will see you soon.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com.
Jill.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.